Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Well, today I've got a couple of Dogman encounters to share with you. Before we get into these encounters, a couple links I'd like to share as well. As you know, I rely on my Patreon, PayPal, and merch to help keep this channel continuing to grow and go. I also have a second channel for creepypasta, fan fiction, and scary voice acting. Stories that don't fit on this channel. If that's anything that you're into, follow that link below and give those stories a listen. You may just like what you hear. Also, I just started a GoFundMe page to help raise some money for urban exploration, cryptid hunting, and ghost hunting equipment. If that's anything that you're willing to help with, that link is in the description below as well. Now I've definitely taken enough of your time. Let's get on with these Dogman encounters. Shall we? Today's first Dogman encounter comes to us from Wyoming. I was 16, cruising around at night in the Blacks, a small area where people used to go four-wheeling, now a developed area. This is in East Cheyenne, between an area known as Sun Valley and Lincoln Valley Auto Salvage. I was driving in an easterly direction on a dirt road and saw some kind of wolf-like creature in my headlights, approximately 60 yards in front of me. First thought was coyote, but it wasn't. It seriously looked like a werewolf from the movies. I only saw it for a couple seconds. The thing glanced halfway at me and my lights reflected on its eyes, which were bright yellow and glowing, and it ran off over a hill. But it scared the crap out of me. I rolled up both windows and locked my doors and started turning my truck, a 76 K5 Blazer, to see if I could catch on with my headlights again. I didn't see it again. And I wasn't about to go any further. Like I said, I was scared. I ended up turning around to the nearest neighborhood by a couple of street lamps, unlocked my door and bailed out, and immediately scrambled to the ground to look under the truck, much like bailing off your bed as a kid, leaping halfway across the room and jumping down to look under your bed just to prove that there's nothing really there. I still laugh about it. I had a look crazy to anyone in that neighborhood who saw me. Anyway, the best way to describe what I saw was like a wolf, but it was like a movie werewolf. If it had stood up straight, it would have been about 5 feet tall. It wasn't completely covered with hair, if at all. I remember it had dog-like face, with cheek tufts and shorter pointy ears, as well as a snout like a dog. Its arms were like an orangutan, and its hind legs were shorter than a human. Like I said, like the movie werewolves, except it wasn't all that huge at the shoulders and neck, like you see in a lot of comic werewolves. Today's second Dogman encounter comes to us from Kenton, Kentucky. There were 3 deer standing there, all huddled up together, between my car and the guardrail. They weren't looking at me, though. They were looking across the road. I looked back over there, and that is when I saw a figure standing between the bushes in front of it and the tree line behind it. It was huge. I stand 5'5". Some of those bushes were about 6 feet tall, but they only came to about the collarbone area of this thing. Due to the streetlight to the right of it, about 20 feet away, I was able to get a pretty clean outline of this thing. It had a large dog-shaped head and pointed ears. I couldn't make out its neck, but I could make out the massive shoulders it had. That's when it growled. It was a deep vibration I could feel in my chest, and my body just took over at that point. I have to explain this part to you. I worked security for years in California in the music business, and as a woman, I really had to work out and train to defend myself. I kickboxed for 8 years and worked out daily. I also trained dogs, mainly German Shepherds. I had to establish who was the alpha, and to do that I would get down with them, hold them in place, grab them by their ear and growl until they submit. Then the training could start. So when this thing growled at me, I was pure instinct. I dropped down in a crouching position and growled right back at it. When I did that, it stopped growling and started to sniff the air. Its snout went up and it turned its head slightly as it was sniffing. It then took a few steps forward. I was still crouched down on all fours and moved forward, still growling at the thing. When I did that, it stopped. I stood up and kept staring right at it. I never broke eye contact with it. Then it stepped back slowly into the tree line until I couldn't make it out as clear anymore. And it started to move to the right of me. The deer were still behind me. They were so close I could have reached out and touched them. I waved my arms and told them to get out of here, and when I did that, they went back over the guardrail and took off down the hill. That's when I jumped in my car and got out of there as fast as I could. I felt this thing was trying to circle behind me, and I wasn't going to wait around for that. Our third Dogman encounter comes to us from Florida. We heard something that still raises the hair on the back of my neck to think of. Off in the distance, coming from somewhere in the woods, we heard a loud, eerie, howl-like groan. It went on for about 8 seconds. Everything felt silent for a second, and my eyes just turned huge from fright. I don't think I've ever been that shocked before. That's when we heard one of the men say loudly, "Hear that?" That must have been the thing Tony was talking about the other night, and the men just laughed. A few minutes later, we heard a raspy growl from outside the fence near us. Billy and I grabbed one another. I remember Billy's exact words. "Adam, listen to me, man. I'm scared out of my mind right now, so I might not be making the best decision right now, but I say we get out of here and go home." So we sneaked over to the gate that we crawled in under and gave ourselves a moment to prepare for a mad dash we were about ready to make through the woods. We looked back one last time. I wish I hadn't. Standing in the middle of the lot behind us was what looked like the cross between a human and a kangaroo. It was standing under a light, so we got a pretty good look at it. It looked like it was about 5 feet tall from where it was standing. It had a human-like head, and it seemed to have a small snout. The legs were bent like a kangaroo's, and its arms hung down by its knees. It was watching something over to its left. Oddly enough, the thing bobbed its head every few seconds as it stared at whatever it was looking at, sort of like a bird. Also, it seemed to have long hair from the top of its head down the middle of its back. The thing didn't seem to have any fur. Honestly, it was the most horrifying thing I have ever seen in my life. We knew we had to leave that place. I didn't want to meet that thing face to face. We went under the gate and ran. Our final Dogman encounter comes to us from Trumbull County, Ohio. December 26th, 2016. I saw something that day that still has me totally shaken to my very core. I've always loved nature. I love the woods. I love hiking and camping, fishing. I'm really into mycology, so I'm out looking for mushrooms and various types of fungus whenever I get a chance. The weather was absolutely beautiful that day for this time of the year. So towards evening time, I decided to round up some of my walleye gear and head to the old train trestle on the Wyoming River in Niles, Ohio. I had parked my car about 1.5 miles from the trestle so I could walk the tracks and hit a few other spots along the river on my way down there. By the time I reached the trestle, it was pretty much dark. I was wearing a headlamp at the time, so I had a depending light source. At this location, there is a lake directly across the river, which the two are connected by a small overhead dam. I was there for 15 minutes when all of a sudden this overwhelming feeling of dread came over me. I switched my headlight on and turned around to start back up the riverbank, and right behind a black sycamore tree, I saw what looked like a very large animal, kind of kneeling besides and behind it. As I locked eyes on it, I completely froze. I knew I was definitely seeing something there, but my mind couldn't process it. What I was looking at all didn't make any sense. The thing that I kept saying to myself is, animals aren't supposed to look like that. Right as I'm thinking this, it's as if this thing read my mind, stood up and made itself perfectly visible in the most pretentious way. It almost had this vibe like, yeah, now you see me. You know I'm real, I definitely exist. What are you gonna do about it? And as soon as that happened, it kind of hunched over and made its way into the brush. I was out of there like a flash. As soon as my feet hit the tracks, I ran and ran the entire way back to my car without stopping. By the time I reached my car, I couldn't breathe. Both my legs were locked up. I was vomiting, and somewhere in between the encounter and running away, I had pissed myself. It's early Friday morning now, and I think I've only slept for about 6 or 7 hours altogether. I've been constantly searching YouTube and all kinds of stuff, listening to eyewitness accounts, and it sounds like these things are encountered quite often. I've heard of the Dogman before, but never really took it serious before that night of the encounter. I would always picture a Dogman to look like some little skittish coyote-looking creature. Man, I love the woods and I love nature. The woods for me was always a safe haven I could venture into to escape stress. Stress at work, bills, relationship problems. I could always take a nice long hike, go fishing or foraging, and come home feeling 75% better. Now I feel like I was threatened and kicked out of my second home. The only thing I can keep thinking is these things aren't supposed to exist. I feel like a terrified little kid who just came face to face with the dreaded monster in your closet. You know that monster your parents told you, no wait, assured you wasn't real and couldn't hurt you. People need to be made aware of these things. They are real, as it gets, and they are dangerous. Thinking back to what this thing looked like and how it was built, these things are perfectly adapted killing machines. The way the arms and legs looked, it looked like it was perfectly adapted to walk on all fours as well as two legs. It was so quiet and fluent in its movements as well. It's not like in the movies where the monster comes charging out of the woods, growling and snarling. These things are masters of camouflage, and they utilize the darkness perfectly. I didn't notice a smell from it, probably because the wind was on my back at the time. But it sure smelled me. Its nose was up in the air the whole time of our encounter, just sniffing away. This experience has torn a huge hole in me. Every time I eat, I get nauseous. I can't sleep for more than 20 minutes at a time, and every time I close my eyes, that thing is all I can see. I'm trying not to dwell in fear. I'm trying to accept what I saw and what happened, but it's hard. I'm really glad I found out that there's more people that have seen these things. Just helps me know that I'm not alone. For Dogman encounters: Wyoming, Kentucky, Florida, and Ohio. Amazing encounters. The Kentucky encounter made me laugh a little bit to think of a 5'5" woman on all fours growling at the 7-foot Dogman. I don't think the Dogman was too happy about that. I think if she had stayed around, I think that he would have ripped her to shreds. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed these encounters. I got a little bit of research to do for a subscriber who asked a question last night, and I will get back to you today on that. And with that, guys, I bid you farewell, and I'll see you tomorrow.